When this couple set out on their honeymoon, nobody expected it to turn out this horribly. They said goodbye at the airport and promised to keep everyone updated throughout the trip. But suddenly, the couple disappeared for 7 long years, and when they mysteriously re-emerged, the woman gave a shocking confession. But before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. At the start of this bizarre journey, Judith and Andrew were just a happy married couple, being dropped off at the airport by their parents. Egypt was the destination for their honeymoon, but their parents didn't realize that this would be the last time they would see their kids in 7 years. The couple promised to inform their parents and friends throughout their trip to Egypt. They waved goodbye with a broad smile as they boarded the plane through the airport gates. And for the first few days, they made good on their promise. Updates kept flooding in with mesmerizing pictures of their surroundings. But then, out of nowhere, everything stopped. This picture was the last photo sent to Judith's mother's cell phone on the second day of the honeymoon trip. And after that seemingly innocent moment, there was nothing but silence. There were no pictures, no interesting stories about ongoing adventures in Egypt. Absolutely nothing was heard. Both Judith's and Andrew's parents talked to one another about this behavior change and came to the conclusion that the couple was probably just busy. It was their honeymoon after all, and they were meant to enjoy it. But on the day of return, panic hit hard with everyone involved. The plane arrived on the tarmac at 2:00 p.m. Eastern Time, but when the large Boeing 777X opened its doors and its passengers got out, Judith and Andrew were nowhere to be seen. One by one, the plane emptied until there was no one left. But still, no newlywed couple stepped out. After the gate eventually closed, the worried parents went to the help desk for answers. Behind that counter, a staff member of the airline sat. Both parents nervously questioned the uniformed woman to look into this, but the answer she came up with added even more tension to the situation. Both Judith and Andrew never checked into the plane. According to the company's computer system, the plane left Egypt with every chair filled except for the one reserved for their offspring. Worries grew within the two families, and they tried everything they could to get in touch with Judith and Andrew. The first thought was to call their closest friends, but they also heard nothing after that last picture. The hotel in Egypt was their next safe bet. At that point, both families still held on to a grain of hope. But that hope was extinguished by the news the hotel clerk provided over the phone. According to the hotel clerk in Egypt, the couple arrived a little over a week ago, which sounded right. Judith and Andrew checked into the hotel and were seen for the first few days, but when it was time to check out, they never showed. But the clerk said something much more problematic after that. The female worker stated that she ordered staff members to check their room at the end of the day since they were overstaying their welcome. Apparently, Judith and Andrew disappeared without taking anything with them. All their belongings were still inside the hotel room, making it look like they vanished into thin air. After that disturbing news, things got serious. They had to contact the authorities in Egypt. Phone calls were made, but with a disappointing result. The police over there didn't seem to take the case seriously and calmly stated that they would look into it, words that came across as untrustworthy. There was only one thing the group of parents could do. They had to search for answers and find their children in Egypt themselves. Both fathers agreed to set out on this mission together, while the mothers got busy back in America. They hung up missing posters and used the media to get nationwide attention. Unfortunately for both mothers, their search quickly hit a dead end. Their hotline ran cold quickly, making all hope of solving this case fall on the shoulders of the two fathers searching in Egypt. The worried men started their search at the hotel where their children stayed. Upon arriving, they were greeted by the clerk. The same woman who spoke to them on the phone was happy to help out, understanding their concern. The two men were guided to Judith and Andrew's former room. It was indeed filled with their belongings. Even their passports were found, making it extremely unlikely that they left on their own regards. It was a worrisome sight, but both fathers tried to give themselves hope by thinking that without their passports, they couldn't leave the country. They were still in Egypt and probably hadn't gotten far. But what they didn't know at the time was that this case was far more complex than they ever imagined. The next stop was the local police station, but both fathers didn't hold much hope for cooperation after their last phone call. And they were right, because the policemen were far from interested and only stated that Judith and Andrew would probably show up eventually. The cops in Egypt weren't going to help. The two fathers were on their own, and after a month-long search, they did not find a single clue to their whereabouts. Both parents searched a vast area around the hotel but eventually had to return home defeated. The families never gave up hope, but a painful 7 years passed without a single word. Back home, the police dug around for a while, but after a couple of years, the case was labeled cold until one day, after 7 years, the phone rang in the home of Judith's parents. Judith's mom answered the call, and when she heard it was the police, her eyes widened. The police ordered Judith's mother to listen closely since they had news about their daughter and son-in-law. According to the uniformed man, the police found the couple this very morning in a remote parking lot somewhere in the United States. This unexpected news sends shivers down the worried mother's spine. Judith's parents almost considered the probability of seeing their daughter again impossible. So, the fact that they were now found and on solid ground in America was insane. Judith's mother quickly called her husband over, and together they listened to the officer's words. How? What? Where? Were their hastened words. The police officer calmly explained over the phone that the case was too complex to explain like this. So, he had a different proposition. He asked Judith's parents to come to the police station to witness and hear from their daughter themselves because Judith was already there and brought to the station. That didn't have to be said twice to the two worried parents. After a few final words, the phone was hung up and the worried parents rushed to their car. The car was placed in gear, and as quickly as possible, the duo raced to the police station. On the way over, their thoughts wandered. The two parents speculated the entire trip, trying to think of ways to understand where their daughter and her husband had been these 7 years. But they could not come up with a single answer that made sense. But that was all about the change, because the station came in view after 10 minutes. When Judith's parents arrived at the police station, they saw that the car belonging to Andrew's parents' car was already there. It was logical for the police to also inform them, and Judith's mom knew they must have been just as delighted as she was. She stepped inside with tear-filled eyes. After the doors of the police station closed behind them, both Judith's mother and father saw their daughter instantly. Judith was sitting in an interrogation room with her husband. They looked feral and scared, which made Judith's mother's desire for a quick reunion even more intense. But there was a problem. But things could not go her way, unfortunately. Judith's mother looked to the right and saw Andrew's parents sitting on a side bench. They were both crying and stated that policemen wouldn't let them inside the interrogation room, and this statement was confirmed by the officer who came by to address the worried parents. The policeman greeted them all and recapped the strange nature of Judith's and Andrew's discovery. He explained that a gas station operator had spotted the couple earlier this morning. The worker found them completely disorientated, laying face down on the station's parking lot about 2 towns over. And that wasn't all. The weirdness continued because the officer added that the couple was dressed in thin summer clothing while it was -5 degrees outside. The two were in bad shape and were suffering from severe hypothermia. These words caused all 4 parents to increase their anxiety, and they demanded access to the room immediately. The officer obliged, stating that he only wanted to wait until they got the whole story from the kids. But now that this was done and all 4 parents had arrived, it was time for them to enter the interrogation room. However, they were ordered to stand against the wall until Judith finished her story. As the teary-eyed parents entered the room, they looked at their children in disbelief. They looked like they went through some serious hardship, and in a moment, everyone would find out why. The police officer calmly asked Judith to explain the full story to her parents, just like she did with him. Judith wiped away some tears and started recounting everything. She explained how she and her husband, Andrew, had been left at that parking lot blindfolded and bound. After hours of struggling, they freed themselves, and a gas station operator eventually found them. But before that, they had been held captive for over 7 years. The man who kidnapped them had followed them all the way to Egypt before abducting them. That man was Victor Portera, dangerous loan shark with deep criminal ties. Judith admitted that it was all her fault. After college, Judith developed a gambling problem and soon found herself deep in debt. Victor kept loaning her money at predatory rates until she was trapped, unable to repay. Eventually, Victor put his plan into motion. He followed the couple to Egypt, where they were abducted and secretly flown back to the U.S., where they were held in a remote warehouse. Victor didn't just want his money back, he wanted leverage. The couple was kept blindfolded and isolated most of the time. Occasionally, Judith's blindfold would be removed when she had to carry out part of Victor's scheme. Victor created a dating profile using Judith's identity on a website for wealthy men. She was used to lure unsuspecting victims into a trap. These men would arrive at a designated location expecting a date, only to be ambushed by Victor's men. They were either robbed or blackmailed, and Victor profited immensely. Judith's parents were horrified. They asked why she didn't just refuse. Judith said she would have taken the punishment alone, but Andrew's life was also on the line. She agreed to help Victor in exchange for promises that each successful scam would reduce her debt. For 7 years, she played her part, always hoping it would end. Eventually, the debt was cleared. Despite being a criminal, Victor kept his word. The couple was blindfolded and dropped off at the parking lot, where they were later discovered. The police officer explained that Victor made one fatal error. Judith's blindfold wasn't tight enough. She saw a sign on the warehouse that helped investigators locate the exact place of their captivity. As he finished explaining, a voice crackled over the police radio. "We've got them! It's over!" Judith and Andrew broke down in tears, finally able to hug their parents. After all these years, they were safe and could finally breathe again. About a month later, Judith and Andrew faced Victor again, but this time in court. They testified, revealing everything they had endured. It was difficult, but the judge understood Judith's actions were forced. The trial ended in victory. Victor and his men were sentenced to life in prison, never to harm anyone again. Judith was fully absolved. Victims of the scam would be compensated, and the future finally looked bright again.